Welcome to Beyond the Frame, a show by the SOCA Global Outreach Office, sharing the new, the now, and the necessary in a digest of thought-provoking news and tidbits from the global art world, with a particular focus on marginalized voices. We bring you news and stories centered around equity, inclusivity, and sustainability, exploring the places where art is urgent, political, and current, while reflecting on the complexities of today's world. My name is Gillian Rhodes, and I am your host. Today's episode will be a bit different than usual. Rather than the usual format, I'll mostly be discussing news, thoughts, and reflections from the Resource conference I recently attended in Venice, Italy. Resource is the 10th International Conference on the Histories of Media Art, Science, and Technology, which is a conference series produced by the Media Art History Organization. I'll talk about the conference more in a few minutes, but first I want to talk about one of the hottest news stories in the art world these days: the ongoing multi-year theft of almost 2,000 artifacts from the British Museum collection. If you haven't heard this news yet, it's pretty wild. The news broke in August that a senior curator, which the art newspaper names as Peter Higgs, while other news outlets have not mentioned any names, had been stealing artifacts from the British Museum's extensive, uncatalogued collection and selling them on eBay, often for much less than their actual value. But this wasn't some petty theft. The article estimates the number of stolen artifacts as between 1,500 and 2,000 over the course of several years. The total value of the stolen items are estimated to be around tens of millions of pounds and could include artifacts dating back as far as 3,500 years. But wait, it gets worse. As the story broke, it came to light that allegations had been brought against Higgs, or whoever the perpetrator was, as Higgs' family claims innocence, back in 2021 and were dismissed or suppressed by director Hartwig Fischer. That could explain Fischer's abrupt resignation in July before the news came out about this intense inside job. Fischer, however, insists that the allegations were taken seriously, and the investigation has just been ongoing since then. It does not explain why he resigned now, however. There is a lot of news flying around covering this, and I suggest that you take the time to read some of the articles yourself. I won't talk about all the details, but I do want to highlight something that many news outlets are already saying, which is about significant damage to the British Museum's reputation and the effect on the repatriation debate. One of the long-standing arguments against repatriation of looted or stolen artifacts is that Western museums, such as the British Museum, are more capable of preserving and protecting heritage. Their supposed enhanced ability to catalog and preserve cultural artifacts in the face of Global South's so-called incompetence or instability is a faulty but often cited reason. However, here we are, faced with the reality that the British Museum has thousands of uncatalogued items unprotected in a store, and its senior management neither knew nor particularly cared that items were going missing, or were unable to believe such a situation could exist. One of the reasons to not catalog items in the first place is indeed a way of avoiding repatriation. As the art newspaper notes, it's difficult to ask for items back if you don't know they exist or where they are. I find the whole situation deeply ironic, but disappointing as well. I don't expect that the British Museum will suddenly find it in themselves to catalog their items or repatriate the Elgin marbles. Rather, I expect they will continue to find excuses and hide colonial rationale under big talk and bluffing. They are currently calling on the public and experts to help recover the objects and successfully avoiding other questions. In the best case, I hope that this news will shine a brighter and more unforgiving spotlight on the sanctimonious self-righteousness of other Western museums and put deeper pressure on these museums for repatriation. I take this as a good point to segue into the discussions of the Resource Conference, a number of which did in fact reference the ongoing dialogue of decolonization and showed that the Western academic milieu is indeed trying to address ideas of decolonization and equity. The concept of the Anthropocene and its problematic attributes, including Western patriarchal narratives of domination and control, was called into question in multiple presentations, especially as one of the main foci of the conference was around climate change and the role of media art, science, and technology in addressing it. Rather than discussing specific presentations, I want to share some reflections about the overall themes and narratives that came up, including decolonization, climate action, and archiving and preserving digital artworks and developments. But first, I just want to note that it was interesting to see in this academic environment the separation between the traditional ivory tower approaches that favor typical ways of knowing or cited literature and very niche case studies, and the more grounded practice as research-based projects. These latter could also be separated between the theoretical art for art's sake type of research and practical real-world related issues. The incorporation of science and technology as central themes, along with media art, led to a variety of science art approaches. Let's talk about the themes, starting with decolonization. It was abundantly clear that the academic world is trying to approach the discussion. There is some irony in the West, the main perpetrators of imperialism, trying to dictate what decolonization should look like. Though the prevalence of this discussion does at least show that the process of mental decolonization, in which the privileged white West understands that it is not the supreme culture and civilization, and which is absolutely necessary for further action, is at least happening. Still, there were moments when I found myself questioning the outcome of the occasionally performative interest in decolonization. For example, a few presentations used the idea in connection to human relationships with other creatures, including animals and microbes referred to as more than humans, such as communication or connection to slime molds or other bacteria. All this could address humanity's problematic relationship with nature and ecological systems. I found it very strange to sidestep relations with other cultures and countries in favor of this more nebulous definition of more than humans. Other times, I found that the speakers were using words around decolonization, but continuing to present Eurocentric ideas and viewpoints. References, artists, and concepts were often drawn from Western sources or scholars. If the West can contribute to the decolonization discussion, it must be to uncenter itself in its approach, outlook, and sources. I felt a similar cognitive dissonance in the discussion of the climate crisis. There was little to no mention of the role of capitalism and corporate structures in the developing climate emergency, with the discussion sliding around causes and focusing most intensively on the urgency and immediacy of the situation. One presentation actually called out the hypocrisy of a room full of Westerners, most of which had flown into the conference, including me, I have to say. Their presentation looked at how the cultural and creative sectors contribute hugely to emissions in the form of cultural tourism, and the supposed necessity of traveling to conferences and workshops like that one for art professionals. It immediately occurred to me that this is a dichotomy only for those with privileged passports. A great deal of unnecessary travel could be avoided if these passports were restricted in the same way as many Global South countries. Like with the decolonization, I found that there was a lack of understanding and responsibility around the daily, on-the-ground impacts and contributions that privileged people have. It's true that these issues are huge, systemic, structural issues that one individual can never address alone, but the individual also supports and contributes to them. It's something that I, as a white Westerner, think about a lot on a daily basis. To conclude on a less heavy note, one of the tracks of the conference involved memory and archiving, especially as technology advances. While we often think of digital creations or digitized works as lasting forever, for example, what you say on the internet stays there forever, it's not actually true. And the security of a digital archive can be even more fragile than a physical one due to swift technological advances, cloud space, and archiving methods. Presentations approach this in a variety of ways, from the issue of documenting artworks with user interactions to digitizing physical artworks. I won't go into great detail here, but this question occurred to me as I was listening to the various presentations, which is that, considering all our digital access and devices, how will we remember in the future? Thanks for watching Beyond the Frame, a production of the SOCA Global Outreach Office. See you next time!